And we are live. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Stokastic Fantasy Football Channel. My name is Matt Savoca. You guys know me, but I am very excited that Nick Lepre is here. We always miss Nick Lepre. We love the man, Notorious Fantasy. He's got a family matter to attend to today. That means we have a chance to have a special guest here, Andy Francess. You've seen him on the channel before, on the Odd Shopper channel as well, our brother channel over there. Follow him at Andy Francess. Really excited to have you on the show and officially meet you on a show. We've never done a show before. Excited to make it happen. How are you this fine Tuesday?
How's it going? It's the kind of a thing they treat me kind of like Hannibal Lecter, where it's like, all right, make your videos over there. We're not going to release you to the public. So today, they're letting me out into the wild. So I guess we'll see how it goes.
No, it is kind of true. I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for the show. Like, we make a lot of content over here that is in a similar vein, me and you, but we do a lot of it on our own, or just, with one other person. We're other opposite ends of the building, despite doing very similar work. So it's exciting to get in the same room with you, talk ball with you. And, by the way, you do multiple sports. I've seen you talk hockey very, very well, but I'm excited to talk week 4 and rest of season rankings today, because we're a quarter of the way through the fantasy football season, as crazy as that is. Why don't we just take a macro view? Are there any players or teams that have just completely surprised you, either positive or negatively, as we reach the quarter mark of this season?
I don't know if this is kind of cliche to see, but so many times they try to sell you a bill of goods on a team, like a team that maybe they make you think is like a piece or two away from actually being good or a contender in the division. And I don't know if it's just hyping it up and just trying to get some articles over the summer, but this time around, I really just thought that Jacksonville was going to be a continuation of the garbage they were year after year. And they really actually look pretty good. Even in the game they lost, they came back. They were down, I think, 2 touchdowns to the Commanders. They came back, had a lead in the fourth quarter, and they lost that one, came back, shut out the Colts, went to L.A., crushed the Chargers, albeit like a weakened version of them, but still, they made it look relatively easy. The other things, like, look, I watched Josh McDaniels go 6-0 with the Denver Broncos, however many years ago that was, and then the whole season fell apart. So I'm one of those people. It doesn't matter the sport. I'm not an overreactor. I'm not an underreactor. I'm an appropriate in the middle reactor. So it's like, what do I think of the Dolphins? I don't know. Are you going to rely on them coming back from 8 touchdowns down in the second half and, Buffalo having the ball for 2/3 of the game? Like, these are not reliable things. So, I mean, there's a reason they're 4-point underdogs against the Bengals, who are 1-2. So, I don't know. I tend not to overreact, but Jacksonville looks pretty good. Like, they on both sides of the ball. So, does that qualify as one?
Absolutely counts. Currently, Jacksonville in team overall PFF grades. So that's grading each individual player on each individual play. Top 12 in the NFL right now. I don't know if I'd put them as a top 12 team, but they're performing way above expectation. And I like the way you put that. You're still not falling into the small sample trap just through 3 games. You got teams who find themselves in unique situations every single week. We still have some settling in to the actual NFL season to do. As Lofty would say on the Stokastic DFS channel, why can't we just be whelmed? Not over or underwhelmed. Can we please just be whelmed by most
Standard
teams?
whelmed.
We're just whelmed by most teams, including, I will add, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, who I think pulls it together significantly better over the course of the second half of the season for sure. This team has to get healthy offensively. Their offensive line needs to figure it out first and foremost. But with that receiving core, the talent in the receiving core, and them continuing to get healthier, I do think you figure it out. They're 23rd in the league in passing. Okay, I do want to get to the rankings today because we only got 45 minutes to talk 2 positions, and I want to talk rest of season and week 4 rankings. Obviously, these rankings will shift. As you guys know, we use the expert consensus rankings for Tuesday's show, and then we shifted over to the Stokastic projections and rankings for Wednesday through Friday's show. because that's when the Stokastic projections come out. So it's fun to do this comparison every Tuesday, help you guys with waiver wires as well. And I appreciate you all hanging out in the chat today. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, do all those fun things that helps YouTube understand what we're all about. And let's go get those wins. Oh, look, is this like the emperor meter? Like, am I?
Yeah. It's yeah, Commodus.
All right. Let's get into this. You ready to roll with quarterbacks in tier 1?
Sure thing.
Let's do it. Okay, guys, you've heard of these players?
Who's that? Who's the first guy?
I'm not sure. It might be a soft or a long A. Josh Allen. It's like
he's one of those guys. I mean, I didn't have any public videos or anything back then, but I would have taken the biggest fat L of my life. Because after I see someone through a full year, when he was just air-mailing balls, completing 6 passes a game, like we're seeing Justin Fields do now, I am of the belief usually like, oh, it doesn't turn from I completed 6 passes a game to I'm one of the most accurate passers in the league, going to AFC championships, going throw for throw with Mahomes. And he shoved that. I think you guys curse on here, but you know where he shoved it. And yeah. I would have taken a huge fat loss.
Say whatever you like. In 2019, to your point, the Buffalo Bills had the 7th worst passing grade in the entire NFL. Josh Allen couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and the old adage, you can't teach accuracy, was proven dead freaking wrong with Josh Allen. And the rushing upside of these other 2 players, I mean, don't take away the passing upside of Lamar Jackson this season. He's passing fantastically well, and no one else on his team is running very well. He, of course, is on another planet. Same with Jalen Hurts so far this year. Man, that Philadelphia offense, if I was going to overreact to one team, it would be positively to Philadelphia. They look really strong on both sides of the ball. Jalen Hurts is a top 3 QB for me rest of season.
Yeah, it seems like when you get the dual quarterback and they're hitting those random strides, you saw this with Kyler Murray early last year and then a chunk of the previous year. We've seen it with Lamar Jackson during his MVP year. When they're hitting this throwing, running balance and both seem to be working out, it's like the ultimate ceiling for these type of quarterbacks. The problem, in my opinion, like you just saw with those 2 aforementioned ones, what happened to Kyler Murray? What happened to Lamar after they? It seems like it comes in these waves. And it's not like, oh, this is them, and now we could expect this for the next 3 years, which is why most of the people regretted overdrafting those guys the previous 2 years. But
yeah.
All 3 of those guys you got on the screen right now are riding one of those, Keanu Reeves Point Break waves right now. All 3 of them. All 3 of them. Like, it's just – and Josh Allen, I mean – what did he almost threw for 400 yards still? Like, even though he didn't have a lot of touchdowns, doing everything out there. And Hurts is in one of those type of, it seems like defenses, they need to refigure out how to defend him. And until that happens, quarterbacks take a ton of advantage against that, because it's like, I thought he was not going to be throwing it a lot this year. If you look at how he played last year, it's predominantly running. It's not like he was the most accurate guy, but I mean, he's hitting these receivers left and right. So those 3 guys, yeah, they are in a tier of their own right now.
Seems like A.J. Brown kind of changes things around town once he gets there. And Devonta Smith looked awesome last week against a.
But still, you can put A.J. Brown with Justin Fields. I promise you, his numbers aren't going to be, through the roof. It's like Hurts is making good throws. I understand that he's definitely helping open up more, but he's making tough downfield throws that are pretty on the money at the moment. It's very impressive.
Absolutely right. To your point, in 2021, his accuracy rating on playerprofiler.com, 26th in the NFL. In 2022, his accuracy rating of 8.5 is number 1.
This is great, man. This is great, because I need a guy like you, because I see these things, and I can, like, those numbers are there in my head. Like, this looks considerably different than it did last year. I wonder what the numbers are. And that's when you can kind of like lean in off screen. Well, actually,
That's me, the well, actually guy. I'll be here to well, actually, all the way through. Happy to do it. And if you look at our week 4 tier 1. It's the exact same, slightly different order. It's just matchup dependent. Allen and Jackson are playing each other. Talk about shootout potential. And Hurts playing the Jaguar team that is better all around, but better offensively more so than they are defensively. I think Hurts still has a chance for a huge spike week. Despite
Now, for this show, are we talking like is this for DFS? Is this for a season long, or just kind of a mishmash of the both of them?
we're kind of helping people specifically with season long, and it being
Okay.
Tuesday, obviously we're leaning on obviously what's going to happen next Sunday, but with a quarter of the way through the season, we want to make sure with rest of season rankings, people can kind of balance those two aspects when they're making waiver claims today, since many people have their waivers go through at some point in the next 24 hours.
So if it's season long, I highly doubt these three guys are going to be benched. So
right,
I think you're just smiling going into the next week.
Now, this tier 2, I think, is sort of to your point where these players very, very recently were in the conversation for number 1, and now they're sliding to 4, 5, 6. We're not talking about outside the top 10 right now, because I think there is a clear delineation between these top 1 and 2 tiers, the S tier and the A tier for the gamers out there, and then everybody else. And if you're thinking about trades, this is kind of my line in the sand for an elite quarterback. But I still believe in Mahomes, Herbert with a banged-up offensive line and a banged-up rib cage, and Kyler Murray, despite this team kind of being all over the place, erratic, if you will, offensively.
These are my personal opinions. I'm wiping Kyler Murray way off that list because of the way that team has looked so disinterested, not just this year. The last quarter of last year, this looks like a direct continuation of Murray does not look as willing to scramble around. Ever since Hopkins got hurt last year, everything seems like a task. Everything seems like a chore. Nothing's easy anymore. Remember, it was all spread them out. This is all easy. We're going up and down the field. Points are not easy to come by. And if it wasn't for Derek Carr just allowing them back into the game, you're going to see a lot more of what you saw last week and week 1. I am staying the hell away from Kyler Murray. Maybe when Hopkins comes back, it opens things up. And I know he had a lot of like junk completions to Hollywood Brown, but there is something weird going on there. Like it feels like it's like he's out to spite the coaching staff or something, where it's like, I mean, I don't really believe this, but it seems like, no, I could run and I could stack up some yards, but I do not like what's going on here, and I'm not doing it. I don't know. There's like something is off. If you compare these games to like his first couple of seasons, he's playing differently.
I hear you there, but he still threw 58 times. He still connected for 37 completions last week against a Rams defense, which I don't think sucks. 314 passing yards and nothing to scoff at. What I will say is I'm surprised to see just 2 rushing attempts. He has not had more than 5
there you go.
the entire season.
Yeah.
That part is strange to me. But if you're throwing almost 60 times,
but there's a difference between the Cliff Kingsbury throws and the Josh Allen throws. A lot of it is just, hey, behind the line of scrimmage, and hope somebody. It's not like he's winging it all over the field. If you know what I'm saying?
No, it definitely is true. His yards per target is not entirely impressive, and you're right. The horizontal raid, as they call it, kind of limits the downfield attempts.
And if he's not running,
yeah.
But I can see why somebody would like him. The guy was called at the beginning of last year like the highest fantasy ceiling ever because of how wild he was when things were working. But
no, I hear you.
If you evaluate the ups and downs, this does not one that seems like, oh, that's going well on the right way. It looks like there's a major disconnect somewhere in that organization, and it's showing on the field. They look like a bad team.
Also, they have to give meaningful snaps to like players I have not heard of. Andre Bocellia, who I thought was an opera singer.
There's an Andre Bocellia.
No,
you got
Andy Isabella, who I saw.
Yeah, I know him, and Dortch, obviously. But you start bringing out Italian guys. You don't have a good roster. I'll tell you that.
I mean, they get Hopkins back soon. They need to get healthy at the wide receiver position, and that defense is is bad. I'm surprised they only gave up 20 points to the Los Angeles Rams. And to your point, to your greater point, we see in our week 4 tiers that tier 2, I call it the great flattening of projections. After the top 3, there really isn't that much difference between Patrick Mahomes and, as you said, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, even though he's got a tough matchup, all the way down to Russell Wilson, who I need to have a whole diatribe about. I'm not sure we have enough time for me to get as annoyed as I really am about this Nathaniel Hackett, non-innovative, boring offensive coaching scheme. But again, just to prove what you were saying before, these players have had a tougher time differentiating themselves in the fantasy category, to the point where I'm not really sure I'm spending huge trade capital to try to get any of these one players. But if I have any one of them on my roster, I feel good enough to start them, and I'm just going to let it ride rest of the season.
Yeah, looking at the guys that you have up on the board, if there are two that are clearly, well, look, Mahomes, I believe Mahomes will he's going to struggle a little more than normally, but he's obviously always going to be capable of monster weeks. But now it seems to be, when he had Hill there, it was like, oh, monster week could come against the toughest defense again in the league. Now it seems like he's going to be able to shred bad defenses, and teams who put up a relatively good defensive effort against them are going to kind of limit him, because, you know, they don't really have somebody to open that intermediate game as much as they thought Valdez-Scantling would. And that's actually, it's hurting them. They're becoming way more defendable, although Mahomes is still great and can easily have a week like week 1. I think the guy with the highest ceiling on this list is Justin Herbert. He had 1/2 of a healthy roster so far this year. And when Keenan Allen had 65 yards in that first half, or first quarter and a half, before he left. So he's been operating without Keenan Allen for a couple of weeks, and we all know he's his most reliable guy. So when you look at him getting Keenan Allen back, assuming Herbert gets back to full health, I'd say by, even if it's not this week, next week, and then he has his assortment of weapons, plus they lost Bosa on the other side, because ideally you want their defense to start giving up some more points to, induce a few more shootouts. Mm-hmm. You know how Herbert can get in these wild ones. If he's got Eckler, Williams, Allen, his ceiling, I believe, is pretty high. And then I think you're going to start to see the best of Joe Burrow as we progress, just by virtue of weapons there. They're one of these sloppy teams that I'm not going to overreact to their poor starts. I think they're one of those teams that's going to play down to opponents, but then play up to opponents. And when you have those weapons that they have there, if you have any faith in Burrow at all, you would assume that there are some big games coming up for him. The other guys, all pretty much into, like, you're right, Cousins, Stafford, you know how I feel about Murray, Wilson to me, I mean, that's you can't trust it until you see it. And you started to see this last year. He couldn't produce with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. The signs were there, but I know Russell Wilson people, they'll find enough excuses to the end of time. So if they want to do that, fine. But he showed you last year, this is what I'm doing now. I ain't running, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit more. You're just getting a continuation of that. You want to blame the scheme, you blame whatever you want. But until you see it change, I would way rather play somebody who's not even on a team who has a good matchup. I would take a matchup-based free agent from quarterbacks than to play Russell Wilson.
He's got a good matchup this week, I will say.
Yeah, no, he does. But the guy, if a guy at home cannot play well against Houston, nothing's on the table. Like, any bad week is now on the table if he can't throw a couple touchdowns against Houston.
That is definitively true. Now, this is hilarious to me, because as you start to look at the rest of season projections, I started to create tier 3, and I go, oh no. There's like no difference between these players.
So this is rest of season. I'm looking at these guys.
Rest of season, and so this is really fascinating, guys. Again, I sound like a broken record. This is the great flattening of the position, where you have to ask yourself, especially if you're considering a trade situation, you might have 2 of these players on your roster, but what is the chance that Trevor Lawrence on any given week outpaces Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Hurts? And I don't mean one of them. I mean all of them. In terms of ceiling potential, there is a difference between these top 3 to 6 players and everybody else. I might throw Joe Burrow in there, and that's why we've got him at 7. But when you run simulations on the season and when you look at the way these quarterbacks pan out, unfortunately for a lot of us, 7 through 16 to 18 start to look really similar. And so I bet you have some favorites in here. Who sticks out in this tier as someone you can't believe is in here, or do you have something to say about how big this tier is, and maybe you would separate it out a little
Well,
bit?
these are just the names, right? There's no way Trevor Lawrence is ranked number 8 the rest of the way, right?
There are some people who are very, very high on him. Now,
No, that's fine. That's
yeah, just to
fine.
reiterate, yeah, from
But
a projection standpoint, especially when you look over multiple different sources of expert consensus rankings, it doesn't actually look that different from a variance perspective from a player like Mariota or Daniel Jones or Jameis Winston.
I don't like insulting those, but you know what? What did your buddy call it? We have to be not
We have to be
over or under. What was it?
whelmed.
Yeah. Well, those experts they need a little serving of whelming, because that's I'll make up endless amounts of terms. But that's too much. That's a lot of whelm for number 8. I mean, to see 3 weeks and go, oh yeah, he's clearly going to be better than Rodgers and Brady the whole time. Of course. Of course. I mean, Brady's throwing to my grandfather out there, but forget about it. Definitely Trevor Lawrence is going to, I mean, that's wild, but you need something to click on. Anyway, Brady, first of all, I mean, come on, does not take a genius to realize if you can get Brady right now while you can, go ahead, do it. You just saw with a bunch of bums against a good defense, he drove down the field at the end and was able to tie the game with a score. Now just add Godwin, Evans, Julio, and whoever the hell else, they'll dig up. They seem to dig up somebody useful out of nowhere.
I feel like Kenny Galladay is about to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
Anyone and everyone is on the table. Okay, so if this is, they're the opposite of, like, you see the Bills all like world beaters week 1 and 2. I use the reference, they're Paul Walker hitting the nos too early in the first Fast and the Furious. You can't be wasting it week 1 to week 7. You can't be playing your best football now. Similarly with the Bucks, it's just going to be the flip side of that, where you're going to see their best ball of the season in the second half, where you're going to get Godwin. Godwin will probably play week 5, and then by week 9 he's fully into it. Evans will be there. Julio will probably be questionable every game.
Mm-hmm.
But then Brady's going to be in his comfort zone. I don't know how any Tom Brady true assessment can be had when he had a quarter of those 3 players in the game, or like a half of those 3 players in the game. And, assuming that offensive line, when you have injuries on that offensive line, seemingly as the season goes on, they know how to make the proper adjustments. In the beginning, it always looks a lot worse because they don't know how to actually, manage, injuries and replacements and assistance, whether, with the tight end and running back. So I look at someone like Brady. Where did he rank last year by the end of the year? Like top. He was number 1, right?
He's actually won in expected fantasy points 3 in fantasy points per game.
So if you're that willing to just throw out someone like that, well, yeah, come on, 3 bad weeks with none of his stars. Well, let's just forget about him for the rest of the year. I mean, I always look at things like that. You're getting the number 1 guy at a discount. If someone's panicking, I mean, look, I'm not a trade for quarterback kind of guy, but if for whatever reason, 8-point touchdowns, you play in some league like that, and you're looking for someone, yeah, Brady is the first I see on that list. And then the second would be Rodgers. Obviously, similar thing. There was no Adams there. He's figuring out week by week what to do with that offense. Week 1 was a nightmare. Week 2 at home, he started, when he got Lazard back, a little bit better. Now we saw a slight emergence of Dobbs in the last game. Tonyan got more targets. He's going to be more healthy, getting more snaps. And then now all of a sudden, you got a Dobbs, Lazard, Cobb, and Tonyan, and then Jones out of the backfield. Watched by midseason Rodgers look like the Rodgers that we expected to see. So if people are down on him because of the way it started, those are 2 guys on that list that I see who absolutely stand out to me.
I mean, the hard part is Brady is QB 27 so far. Rodgers right next to him at QB 26. So we got a long way to go to get back up here. But I absolutely
Well, look,
agree
we're
with you.
not buying stocks when they're number one. We're looking to buy them on the cheap. I mean, I don't know how we're doing business around here, but that's why I'm trying to give you those ones
Yeah.
because, like, if you're trading for, I mean, how much are you really going to get from the Joe Burrow owner? He's not so upset where you're going to get Burrow on a big deal or anything. Just threw for what, 3 touchdowns, 275. So it's like, all right, now the tide's turning. But those other two, doesn't get much worse than this. And now watch Brady. He's going to have Evans and Julio back against KC, where they're going to have a pass-heavy approach. Watch him have a good game. Now all of a sudden, you got to always be 1 week ahead, opposed to 1 week behind, in my opinion.
Very true. Very true. And we're seeing a surprisingly low 45-point total. That might have to do with the weather concerns, to be honest, but that game's going to
Yeah.
get moved if there are significant weather concerns. And again, to your point, we are seeing more of a separation of this tier in single week rankings. The one player that sticks out to me that wasn't on the previous list, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. He may not be with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's a huge blow if that's
And
the case.
Swift.
And Swift is going to be out. And so even though the matchup against Seattle isn't scary to me, I think by week's end, we may see this ranking plummet for Jared Goff. The rest of these players were just on that massive list. I do think, as you said, there's tons of shootout potential in Brady versus Mahomes that isn't baked into the current total of just 45, as I mentioned. Aaron Rodgers also, while I agree with your general sentiment about him returning to form, they would love to run the ball all game long against a backup quarterback led New England Patriots. It's going to be Hoyer, isn't it? It's going to be Hoyer.
Well, that is why I asked. Are we talking like I'm talking about season long? If you're thinking long term, and to try to get value on it. And this week, I weirdly agree with that over under with Tampa Bay, Kansas City, because you're seeing Kansas City the last 2 games not really able to put points up at the clip that they would like, and would the Bucks be happy to go with a more run-centric approach to protect that offensive line until they get a guy or 2 back? So yeah, I do see why it would be low, but on a Sunday night, that always has a chance to shoot out with them. And Rodgers, we'll see, because like I do believe that they know that the offense they're currently running is not where it needs to be. It needs to elevate to a certain point where they can truly win playoff games. So don't be surprised. Like if there's a winnable game, it might not just be feed Dylan, especially if they're throwing a beating. Rodgers is not just going to hand it off all game long. He'll throw a couple of touchdowns, with no Mac Jones, a beating's coming. I mean, at home, Lamar just threw for 5 or 4 and then ran one. But
that New England team is in trouble, man. One other game I do want to highlight is the Miami versus Cincinnati game. 4th highest total on the slate. Absolutely a shootout potential in there. Yeah. What else are you seeing in there? I saw you point out something.
Just a random guy nobody would be excited to play, but anytime those games are indoors, Marcus Mariota against Cleveland, who, is not going to have car accident. What I just
Miles Garrett.
By the way, I'll forget my own brother's name every once in a while. It happens. Like I have the wildest brain farts you could ever imagine. Like a name I've said for 15 years just will be out of my head. And then Clowney missed last week, and about some of their other injuries on the back end. I think they just had to toss like another 2 people on IR. You're looking at a team that is susceptible to having points scored against them. And I know that they like to run the ball, maybe kill the clock, but I always just like that Atlanta environment. For decades now, it seems like games in that building have a decent chance. And I don't know.
26 and 3/4 points per game. That Atlanta team, they've been between 26 and 27 for 3 straight weeks. There's some shootout potential there for sure. That one is at 48.5, the tied for the 2nd highest total on the slate. We got some.
That's sneaky. I wonder if you polled the audience, like in, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you showed them the games and they had to say which one you think. How many do you think would have Atlanta versus Cleveland as their 2nd highest points
Not off the
over
top of
under.
the head, but they know.
Yeah, so that's I love that stuff, especially like for DFS. It's the sneaky. They're winking at you like something's going on over here.
Now, Chef Anabi asks, trade Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Garrett Wilson for Cam Akers and Cordero Patterson. You could also trade Muth over Wilson because you have Goddard. I'm holding CEH, Goddard, Muth, and Wilson, the team that you have right now. Cam Akers looked better to me, and Patterson honestly looks. Oh man,
Second in the league in rushing, right?
Patterson looks good.
Yeah.
I have trouble trusting the older running back, but Patterson's opportunity value, his expected fantasy points are better than CEH's.
Don't forget though, he's like a car that they let sit in the garage for a couple years. He's got that Fred Jackson. Oh, I didn't take all this beating throughout my 20s, so now it's rolling over to my 30s.
Okay, I actually buy that. I buy that. If I could keep Wilson and then get 2 running backs by getting rid of CEH and a second tight end, that's how I would play this one. You're in a nice position here, and Cam Akers' usage was much more encouraging than it was the first 2 weeks. Hopefully, they're just kind of rolling him into the offense a little bit slowly, and he'll get more opportunity going forward. Esoteric Dragon asks,
I would have taken your trade, by the way. I would have done your trade, getting rid of those, and I would have replaced Wilson with Freiermuth to get Patterson, because Patterson, I think, is the best player of that bunch, playing on a losing team that's going to be involved, like just like this week, in like the second highest over/under, garbage points. Played Seattle, garbage points left and right, and he's their best playmaker probably outside of maybe Pitts. So I'm kind of on that side.
I agree. Patterson, just like we all drew it up beginning of the season. I'm streaming the Dallas defense, benching the Bills. The Bills have a phenomenal defense, but they're banged up in the secondary and they're playing Lamar Jackson. I don't need to play with fire like that. Dallas is playing Washington, significantly higher floor and ceiling. We move to our basically our final tier of tier 4 quarterbacks. Some of these players are where they are because they're out currently. Some of them are suspended, and others are just kind of fodder for super flex leagues. I'm not sure we need to spend a whole lot of time here. Very disappointed in what I've seen out of Matt Ryan so far, and just the general lack of explosiveness from the offense. Carson Wentz came back crashing down to earth, playing a quality opponent in the Philadelphia Eagles not unexpectedly. And what can we really expect from Justin Fields or Davis Mills at this point? They look like below average at best quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill's the one who has some higher variance, right? Like he played much better than 26th this week, but was an absolute bum the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I want to say something. I'm going to bring this up to everyone I ever meet. Last year, somehow, people, no one's allowed to make that, well, they got rid of A.J. Brown. Do you know that they didn't have A.J. Brown or Julio Jones or Derrick Henry for pretty much half the year?
Yeah.
And with all those guys gone, he held the 1 seed. So it's like those guys were gone the second half of the year. I want to know how the hell they won all those games. Because if people are like, oh, they're done, they have no A.J. Brown. They never had A.J. Brown. The guy was out of every other game. And then they didn't even have Corey Davis, so they brought in Julio, who missed every game. How the hell did they get the 1 seed? I still want to know, and that's all I'm going to say. It's one of the wildest stories nobody ever talks about.
Well, it's the quality of opponent argument. It's the Brady for years argument that the real reason that he was able to do. I mean, great players do great things, but like when your division is the inept Bills, the inept Jets, and the inept Dolphins, or 2 of the 3 of them are taking turns being inept each season, things can go easier for you. And so the Jaguars, Texans, and not so much the Colts, but even the Colts imploded at the end of the season, helping that 1 seed happen. But Tannehill is a player who has got rushing upside, especially when Henry is on the field with him, because he's used as an incredible decoy at the goal line. Obviously, backers and linemen are going for Derrick Henry and not Tannehill at the goal line. They use that to the advantage. I am going to be aggressive in Superflex leagues with Deshaun Watson. If he is available, like a team is hurting, or for some reason is on a waiver wire because I don't think that would be the case in a 2 quarterback league, that is a team that has shown enough offensive firepower with Brissett that with a quarterback who has been no worse than QB7 in fantasy points per game any season he's been on the field, there's some real QB1 overall potential.
How much did the Niners trade for Trey Lance?
I believe it was a future first and a 12th overall pick, or a
Was
6th
it
overall.
it was 2 firsts?
2 firsts and maybe a third, a mid-round swap.
I will never understand this. So this guy, who we have no clue how he's going to do, fetches a bunch of first-round picks. But Amari Cooper, who's like a Pro Bowl receiver, can easily be your one, scratches you a 5th-round pick. There needs to be a massive correction. I've never understood why like prime Odell Beckham goes for like I think they actually did get a decent return for him. But you see these star receivers going for hardly anything many times. And then a fully unproven commodity based on draft position gets like 3 first-round picks. I'll never understand that. That has nothing to do with this. And may we go on to the next topic, and may God have mercy on my soul.
I think it's the sports car corollary, to be honest, Andy. It's the fact that even if the sports car is not as nice of a model, but it's brand new and it's never been driven, it might be more expensive than a souped up car from 3 years ago that's got 50,000 miles but still drives like a dream. Would we say that there's some incongruency there? I absolutely would. I want to hit the tight end position. We only got about 5 minutes left, so just highlight any players here who you would be focusing on and maybe had more QB1 as in top 12 QB potential than their ranking implies here.
Well, it's going to be with Wentz. Wentz has all the weapons, and once in a while, you just take your loss. Take your loss. Realize you're playing a guy, in the trenches, and he's gonna fight. In 4 fights, it's like he's gonna put up 3 good ones for you, and then he's getting knocked out in the first round. So just deal with that. Deal with that. I mean, these other guys are gonna put you through way more hell than him. And at least in his defense, at least you lost. He's not gonna linger and say, "Oh, it's one of those. All right, let's go out. Not winning today." I've always appreciated losing a bet real early because at least they put me out of my misery. I don't have to lose on the last play.
No, absolutely. That one definitely sticks out to me. Also, I am not so sure about the shootout potential in London, this New Orleans, Minnesota game. I think there could actually be some.
Yeah. But Jameis will keep chucking.
Oh, okay. I'm actually a little worried. I think there's some higher variance here. These two teams could pass the crap out of the ball. They could also just put up a 6-3 game in London.
Oh, there's higher variance with Jameis Winston. Of course, he threw 30 interceptions in a year. He might throw 1 touchdown, 3 picks.
This is true. Let's move it over to the tight end position.
Yeah.
But before I do, you see the banner at the top of the screen, the bottom part of the screen. We got it going on twice over there. Underdog Fantasy is just awesome. You draft your team, you win big prizes. It's really that simple. And I thought Best Ball Summer was awesome. It was really, really fun. But here's the thing. It's not over at all because they've got the Best Ball Resurrection Tournament that starts in week 6. You can draft now, of course. And it goes all the way to week 17. So if your best ball teams are cooked from the summer, if your fantasy teams are struggling a little bit, we're going to get you back on track. But if they're struggling, you get in there, you make a first match deposit bonus, or you make one deposit yourself. They'll match that deposit bonus when you use promo code Stokastic, up to $100. That's free money if you're looking for it. STOKASTIC, up to $100. Get into the action today over on Underdog. Heard of these players: Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, tier of their own. Everybody else is just scraping to try to get weeks like these two can consistently deliver. Waller's not there. Pitts isn't there. Kittle's not there right now. It's these two and everybody else.
I think any week we're going to re-include Waller. If this is 1 week ago, that list is 3 people. And it's because Waller had 2 tight end 1 weeks. We know Carr he loves looking for him all the time. And if he doesn't drop 4 touchdowns last week and draw 2 long pass interference calls, we're having a different combo. But I'm a huge Waller believer because he's a full receiver. He's not in there to block ever. And for an 0-3 team that's probably going to have to throw the ball, I like adding Waller to that mix for rest of season, but I have a little bias with him.
You know what? I buy it. I buy it. The Mark Andrews season so far is just insane.
That's wild, yeah.
It's
It's
just
wild.
insane. But Kelsey's kind of doing his typical thing, even though the offense is kind of sputtering a little bit. Waller with at least 11 half PPR fantasy points the first 2 weeks, and then as you said, there was some contextualization we need to do about this 5.5 point game he had last week. If you look at tier 1, it's the same 2 for week 4. I think it gets more interesting when we talk about this tier. There's Waller, there's Pitts, there's Kittle, and of course Dallas Goedert, who I see some talk in the chat that people are making Goddard versus Pitts decisions. You're in a good place, and frankly, I would be trying to trade if you have 2 of those players. But I really like having a tight end from this tier. Your variance, as I sound like a broken record today, is going to be higher. You're not going to have as consistent weeks, but your spike weeks are going to be just as juicy as the Andrews and Kelsey weeks.
Yeah, when you look at Kyle Pitts, he's going to be in a lot of positive game script situations, as you saw last week. They need to throw the ball. They're going to need to get points. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Got to love that. Waller, I already told you how I felt about Kittle. Unfortunately, I feel because of that injury to Trent Williams, they're going to have to leave him in to help out on the line a lot more. Plus, Garoppolo's going to need to, he got no preseason work in. They essentially stashed him, hoping to trade him. So you saw that. Like, whatever you think of Garoppolo, he's not a step out of the end zone kind of guy. He's not an Orlovsky. That just showed me he really is just not where he needs to be yet. Will probably take a few weeks, but we do know he loves Kittle. Look for Kittle to start probably really ramping up that production you'd hope for him in a couple of weeks because, like I said, Williams ain't going to be there, so they'll need him on the line a little bit more. And Goddard's probably the one I would try to move simply because not to go back to that Fast and the Furious, but I don't know if this Philadelphia pace sustains all year. It's not like he's getting as peppered as those receivers have been. So, with him, you're looking at a couple of those catches each week, and then a touchdown makes you happy. A non-touchdown, you go, I'll take it. So if I was to trade someone on there, you're not going to get value for Kittle. Probably Goddard, if you're looking to move one.
I would agree with that assessment, but I'm holding true to my preseason flag plant that this Philadelphia offense is elite. They're going to.
It could be.
I'm sticking to it, but
no, you should.
The tier 2 of the tight end position on a weekly basis is a little bit bigger. You see all the main players there, but you also add Zach Ertz, who has a decent matchup against the Carolina Panthers, a game that I think has some sneaky shootout potential. And if Kyler Murray's throwing 58 times and Andre Chelia is the player Ertz is sharing the field with, Greg Dortch is a fine player. Getting 9 targets to Greg Dortch should not be a priority for a team. If Zach Ertz can handle the volume, they should get him all the passes.
Yeah. And he's shown as much these first couple of weeks. I can't remember how he did last week, but I know the first 2 weeks. He was limited week 1, so he saved his day with a touchdown, then had a ton of peppered the following week. If they're throwing that short passing game, you saw once they traded for Ertz, he was used a ton. Now, I don't know. Let's see what happens when Hopkins comes back in a few weeks, but you got time until then. He seems like hey, man, put him in there. I know you're not excited to put him in your roster, but he's it's almost like, guaranteed handful of points.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like Goddard will have these longer plays, maybe more touchdown potential. I think in like full point PPR, Ertz, like if you gave me the next 4 weeks, I bet you in PPR, if I had to take a guess, Ertz would outscore Goddard simply based on the way Arizona's doing things out there.
Right, because of the amount of pass volume. That is, I love that bet. That's spicy though.
I mean, it's an idiotic bet. Like, it's like, who would, it's not like, oh, I got the bet of the century. It's more of a coin flip, but.
I'm sorry that we're zooming through at this point, but I want to get here. I realize
It's a hurry up offense, man.
That's right. We're in the 2-minute drill. This one's really interesting. You see Ertz, who we just highlighted a moment ago. Hawkinson, who caught a touchdown last week.
Gotta love him.
Yeah, and if Amon-Ra is out, then he's going to see more opportunity. Speaking of more opportunity than I expected, Mitchell Trubisky just just checking it down to Pat Fryermuth over and over. It's gonna work in
But be
PPR.
careful. He had 0 catches until the final drive of the fourth quarter. So you're really playing that scary game with Mitch. However, I think this is if there's nobody has had a problem moving the ball on the Jets. But I know you Fryermuth owners because I was sitting with one watching that game. It's a sweat looking at that 0 for the majority of the game. Hawkinson, I love him in this game. No Swift, no St. Brown, all the short stuff. You're returning to the last year version of Goff. He defaulted to Hawkinson. He had 7 targets the first 2 weeks. Didn't turn them into much. Had a touchdown last week. Should be a good game for him. Higbee's been more consistent this year because Allen Robinson, I don't know what's going on with him, but he's like turning into their second weapon. Rest of these guys, you're going to be the Njoku guy? You're going to pay for last week's production? All right, fair enough, but at least it's a high over-under.
Of the opportunity in that offense, which I love to see, even though, yes, he caught the touchdowns, that helps, but it was the volume that I like to see.
For Njoku? Yeah, it's just game to game. There's so he clearly has the ability to help out on offense. It's wild that they don't integrate him more often. And then Hurst, I don't know.
Yeah, that one's tough. It's more of the fact that Higgins might be out for a while. He's going to be the third receiving option along with Chase and Boyd.
What about this freak Conklin? You see how many catches he had last week?
Yeah, I mean, there we go. We got him in the top 14 for week 4 rankings. Absolutely. He's clearly the pass catching option in that Jets tight end core. He's had 7+ targets every single week. Caught all 8 of his targets last week for 84.
I believe you have to look and see if Uzoma plays or not. I can't remember, but I think there was like a direct connection between Conklin's uptick in production and maybe Uzoma getting injured or something, because then all of a sudden he was absorbing all the tight end passing work.
Yeah, that's
so it's something you might have to check on. I half remember some things, but I remember I wouldn't just make that up. I definitely heard that there was a connection between an uptick in his production and like routes run to Uzoma going down. And then Everett, clearly Herbert likes him. I mean,
yeah.
If Herbert's chucking, how did Everett, do you know how Everett did this past week? Because we obviously know he had 2 straight solid weeks. It's that visor, man. You put on a tinted visor, you turn into Vic.
Played the most snaps he had all in terms of percentage than he had all season. He had 6 targets, the second most he's had this season, but he only caught 2 for 35, 4.5 fantasy points. Sometimes.
Yep. And then if Allen's coming back, we'll see how much he's used. Because I guess Allen was only there for like a quarter and a half. So I guess it's tough to gauge how he'll be used. I guess we'll see.
Speaking of gauging how they're going to be used, Dawson Knox is in an amazing offense and in a shootout environment, but he hasn't had more than 5 targets this whole season. He's been at 4 or under twice. Glad to see him catch 4 passes the last 2 games, but this is iffy for me. That's why he's barely in the tight end 1 startable tier. If you're in a 14-team league, you're not going out and finding someone else, but you're not happy about Dawson Knox being in your starting lineup either.
Think about how many times Josh Allen just threw the ball. Then think about how much they lit up the Titans. And think about how much they threw against the Rams. If you saw nothing from Dawson Knox then, I got news for you, buddy. Better start hunting that waiver wire, because I could find some loose change on there that's going to be more reliable than Dawson Knox. And now he's going to have 2 touchdowns just to spite me. But then right after that, yeah, but spite only lasts so long unless you're me, and then it lasts a lifetime. But after next week, it's just like this to me is what Dawson Knox is. What do you think? He goes from 5 targets to, and then the rest of the season he was getting 10 a game. No, you're seeing who he is. So I would rather go scrape for some loose change on waivers.
Well, along that line, let's close it out with a question from Miso. Miso, you're going to turn things around. I see that you're 1-2. We got a long season to go. Thanks for hanging out. I got Schultz on the bench injured and Everett in the starting lineup. Worried about the Chargers' offensive line injuries, as am I. Should I go out and try to pick up someone like Njoku this week or just see it through? Andy, I'll kick it to you before I give my answer.
Everett's pretty good. I mean, against Houston, The only two worries would be, is he going to get as many targets when Allen comes back? Or are they going to try to nurse Herbert until he's back to full health? I think those are the two main concerns when you're talking about Everett this week. But he's looked pretty good.
For the rest of the season, I'm not completely enamored with Gerald Everett.
Oh, of
But
course.
I have him top 12. And so if you were sitting on Schultz, I think I would.
I think this guy's just saying this week.
I think I would hold.
The guy's saying, should I try to pick up somebody like Njoku for this week?
Yeah, and I don't want you to hold more than two, especially if you don't have an IR slot for Schultz and he's going to play this game where he's questionable. You got to move him out. I don't want you to have 3 tight ends in a 12-team league on your team. That's just too much roster capital to the tight end position, and I'm not dropping Everett because he's going to be immediately picked up. So I think I am holding in this situation.
So this is just for me. Like, quick, if I was you, man, I'd rather, like, if you saw Tanyan with his uptick in production, I think he had 8 targets, 7 catches for not a lot this past week. This guy's a dirtbag, not as a human, just as what he's done to us through the years. But if you look at the targets that he's got, week 1 and 2, I believe he had 8 targets week 2, 4 the previous week. But Evan Ingram seems to be, Doug Peterson. He uses those tight ends, and then Logan Thomas in that offense, which is always, it seems like they've had to throw a ton. Coming off that injury, what is he at? I mean, last week was garbage. 3 for 45, 3 for 37, and a touchdown. But there are people on there. There are some people on there that are usable. Like I would take either of those guys over Knox. Knox. I don't know. That's just me. I'd rather take the unknown of someone who potentially, is ramping up their usage, like a Thomas coming off the injury and a Tanyan coming off the injury, where you've started to see it heading in the right direction, than Knox, where he's healthy and you're just getting the same flatline, mediocre production every week.
The only thing, that elusive touchdown potential playing with Josh Allen and company.
True.
Hey, this was a whole lot of fun. You guys better follow this man at Andy Francess over on the Twitters. Let the people know what you're doing this season, because I know a lot of you have seen him around here. He did some videos for us heading into the season, but you're doing all sorts of stuff over on Stokastic and elsewhere. Tell the people what you're about.
So basically, oh, look at that. Do you see that? My battery's exhausted. You guys, that is hilarious. I mean, so I'm just going to have to audio this. Shows you how much I'm prepared. And that's like literally Samara from The Ring telling me that's the world trying to tell you guys, do not follow this man. We will cut him off from your screen so you do not get to see who he is. So for the most part, I'm going to be doing football, NFL, and NHL. And those are my 2 sports that I'm willing to actually put my stuff out there to be criticized and judged by the masses, because those are the 2 sports I spent my whole life, really particularly hockey, honing my gambling degenerate craft. So if you guys want to follow me, but then again, you follow me, like I said, it's like watching the tape from The Ring. You're going to be haunted for life. You'll see some things you won't be able to unsee. But I'm going to be doing hockey stuff and NFL stuff, some here on the Stokastic Fantasy channel, also on the Odd Shopper channel. And then I post random things on social media. I do some comedy stuff. It's quite different. I'll just say it's a different experience for the kids. All right. You may need parental approval.
Oh, you gotta sign a terms and conditions. No, yeah. Follow him. The stuff's awesome, Andy, and I've really enjoyed watching it. And guys, if you're not over on the Odd Shopper channel, chasing that edge, we've got over in the betting markets as well. You're making a big mistake. You're leaving money on the table, and Andy's gonna help us get there. He's gonna also unexhaust his battery, and that means it's probably time for us to get out of here as well. We will be back tomorrow. Nick Lepre will be back as well with me at our typical time at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're certainly going to have Andy back on the show. If you'd like to be back, Andy.
Absolutely. Yeah. If your viewers don't despise me, sure. Actually, I'll come back if they despise me. I'm that kind of guy.
That's especially when we'll do it.
Yeah, but like I told you, my spite lasts a lifetime. I'll come back here just to spite you for years. I will forego many things in life to spite the
He's gonna haunt us right now. He's trying to haunt. He's like doing a hex at the moment. This is
You
what's
like
going
that?
on Andy Francess' side right
That's
now.
right. Oh, you don't know the camera's working. I've just shut all the lights off because I got a witch's brew going here, casting spells on all your fantasy teams.
That is exactly what we needed to hear. What a way to close it out, man. And what a debut on these live shows. We'll be back 10 a.m. all week long, Wednesday through Friday. And then, Nick Leprey's here Thursday evenings and Sunday afternoons, getting you ready for every single fantasy matchup you have. For Andy Francess, at Andy Francess on Twitter. My name is Matt Savoca, at Draftaholic. Go follow these. Go follow this man. Go follow me and go get into the action on Underdog Fantasy. Until next time, for the Stokastic Fantasy Football Channel, we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.